Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and we're going to talk about Webtoons. And we're going to talk about how Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is going to be carried to the next generation. Alright, so let's talk about Webtoons, and then let's talk about what that model is going to look like for Dungeons & Dragons. So, if you're not aware, let me explain what Webtoons is. So, Webtoons is a web comic platform. It is not American. I think it's Korean, and it's been around for about 5 years. And basically, what it is it has hundreds, maybe over 1,000 different web comics, and they are made. And every single one of these web comics on Webtoons is made specifically to be read on a phone. Right now, this is a big deal, right? So one of the things that's happened, and you're like, oh, electronic comics, that's no big deal. That's been around forever. No, not really. All right. So American comics have a format. They have it's 24 pages. It's all full color, and it's in these flimsy card stocks that are like 8.5 by 11 or some close, approximately. It's actually less than that. I think it's like maybe 7 by 9 or something. But it's a little less. It's a little smaller than a regular piece of paper, right? And American comics, for a long time, they're like, hey, here's your American comic. We electronicized it, right? And it's been an absolute nightmarish heckscape. It's terrible, right? You're like, this was never created to be read as an electronic document, right? And I actually have something on my, I actually have a full-size monitor that I have in portrait position just to read page-size content, right? And it took a lot to get it set up, and it takes a lot to maintain it, and it's involved, right? And so the reality is, reading American comics on a phone is just horrible. It is a terrible, terrible, terrible user experience, okay? Now, Webtoons solved this, and they made it so that every comic is structured from the beginning to be scrolled on a phone, right? So they made the comic specifically so they're like, every comic that goes on our website, it's going to be one gigantic long scrolling page, right? You just thumb up and it scrolls down, and we're going to put in white space, and we're going to make this comic fit and be comfortable on a phone, right? And once you've done it and you've seen it, you're like, this is great, man. This is like really readable and wonderful, right? So I went on Webtoons. My kids were reading it like crazy. They were like just reading literally dozens of different web comics on it. I was like, I'll give this a try, right? So I go on and I'm like, this platform is amazing. I love it. These web comics can be read super easily. This is very comfortable, and it's a wonderful user experience with suck content, right? I was like, this is a bunch of manga and very non-American content, and I love the platform and I love the user experience, but I hate the content. And honestly, I had Webtoons, and then I deleted Webtoons. And I was like, I don't care about Webtoons, right? Like, I'm like, it doesn't matter to me that you have a great platform for suck content, right? I just did not like the content. The content had no interest to me, right? I'm like, I'm not reading a bunch of, manga about high school, right? Like, I'm not interested, right there. And I looked, to see if there were, and I spent like 2 months like trying to find content I cared about, right? And I couldn't find it, right? So, and I think a lot of people were like, they're like, great, if you like manga, you're gonna like Webtoons, right? Well, American comic fans, by and large, like American comics. They don't like they don't like manga, and they don't like, they're not looking for more manga, right? So here's what changed. Within the last month, something happened. It's a pretty big deal, right? Webtoons got its first DC comic, right? Batman, and DC ain't messing around. They gave them Batman, right? So they said, hey, Webtoon comic, awesome user experience, scrolling experience, but it's Batman, right? And so immediately I was like, what? Wait, what? And my daughter was like, hey, I read Webtoons every day. And I'm like, yep, right? And she's like, well, DC's bringing them in, right? And actually, when she told me, I'd already heard about this from multiple news sources. This made international news, right? They're like, hey, those manga people over there just got their first American comic, right? Now this is blowing up. It's blowing up in a lot of directions, right? People who care about manga are like, hey, we're happy to get some good traditional American comics up in here, right? And Americans are like, wait, you got something I want to read on, like American comic book fans are like, you got something I want to actually read on Webtoons, right? Like, you know, like, and you know, so both, and there are a lot of people talking about this. It's a really big deal. So there are 4 Batman comics that are out that have been produced through Webtoons, and the reason we're talking about this today is this very well may be how Dungeons and Dragons is brought to a modern young audience. And I care about that because I want Dungeons and Dragons to be around 200 years from now. And if there are obstacles to it being consumed by young viewers and young readers and young dungeon masters and young players, then I want those obstacles to be knocked down, right? And Webtoons is doing the work to knock down the obstacles. And I'm a 50-year-old American comic fan, right? I just installed Webtoons, right? And I've read all 4 of the Batman comics, right? So what are the lessons that are being learned from Webtoons, and how are they making and actually, I guess, you know, Webtoons is actually doing the exact opposite of what Dungeons and Dragons needs to do. Webtoons has lots of young viewers and are going to get old viewers. That's like, what? Like, you know, you're like, that's crazy, right? But I think there's some definite lessons to be learned. So one, Webtoons made a lot of money by making a really seamless, comfortable user experience. We do not have that in Dungeons & Dragons. Boy, oh boy, do we not have that in Dungeons & Dragons. Dungeons & Dragons is a horribly friction-filled suckfest when it comes to actually going and playing the game, right? Like, you know, the experience is just horrendous, right? You're like, hey, welcome to Dungeons & Dragons. What would you like to play? I want to play a wizard. You're brand new. It's incredibly complicated. You probably shouldn't play that, right? Oh, you want to play a fighter? So this is your strength score. It's 18 and it's 4. Like, it's horrible. It's just, you know, by the way, you're a 7th level wizard. That means you can cast 4th level spells. What? Like, it's just filled with suck, right? And, do you really want to play this game? Well, you have a lot of homework to do. 750 pages at minimum and 7,000 pages if you're ambitious, right? Like, it is just horrendous, right? Like, you know, and so one of the things is Webtoons is like, we're going to be vicious about this. We are going to make comics fit on a phone. We don't have to, we are going to file off the edges. There's going to be blood, right? We will do it, right? And Dungeons and Dragons is like, nah, we got a bunch of traditions we're going to uphold, and if we stay small and nobody cares about our game, that's fine. You're like, oh, come on, man, right? So one of the things is, like, you know, you could do so much to Dungeons and Dragons, right? You know, and, you know, squeeze all 3 books into one book that's 80 pages long, right? Incredibly painful, but it's going to bring people in. It's going to bring young viewers in, and they're going to say, is this actually as simple as I would want it to be? Is it as fun as I would want it to be? Do combats take 30 minutes and not an hour and a half? Right? Does one person's combat turn actually fit within 90 seconds and not 4 minutes of them looking through, you know, a 300-page book, you know, a 250-page book to find one page and read one sentence out of one paragraph, right? You know, like, and so it will be incredibly challenging to get down and do the work that Webtoons did to make the user experience good, right? The other thing is we're going to have to change the content, right? Like, the young people are not going to put up with a lot of the old traditions that are coming, like Lord of the Rings, right? Increasingly, a lot of young people don't know what Lord of the Rings is, you know, and D&D is systemized Tolkien, right? So we're going to need to change the content, and we're going to need to change the user experience. That's the lesson from Webtoons. Now, here's the good news. It works. Boy, oh boy. So Webtoons, you know, they got a lot of people coming in for American comics, and this thing has blown up big. I really enjoy reading it. I'm there for it. It's very fun. By the way, it's free. Webtoons are free. You ain't got to pay a dime, right? That's another thing. What do we do with free Dungeons and Dragons, right? And you're like, wait, free Dungeons and Dragons? How could they make money? trust me, Webtoons is making money, right? It's a freemium model. You come in for free, right, and you can interact in every single. You can read every single bit of content on Webtoons for nothing, but you have to wait, right? And this could be the same thing with Dungeons and Dragons, where, like, we may have to bring in players where there's just no dollars down when they begin, and that's already available with with kind of the basic rules. But what if all the entire books were nothing? It costs nothing, right? What if every single what if you went down the Pathfinder road and made every book available content free? And the thing is, Webtoons is saying, hey, if you really want multi-generational access, if you want old and young, you've got to file off the edges. You have to get rid of the snags. You have to make it accessible, comfortable, fast, and modern, right? And I agree. I think we're going to need to do it. And I think Webtoons is absolutely a model. And what's happening right now with Batman is very important, and I think it's really a fantastic model. Well, that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.